Fine. So in the today discussion, the session we'll be discussing. So these topics, first we'll understand users in Fusion applications, how we can manage the user related information. Then we'll talk about functional setup manager, FSM, and implementation user creation. We'll see how to create the user in the Fusion applications. Okay. So we'll just go one by one. So users. So when you talk about users in the Fusion applications, so let me take that point, users in Fusion applications. So when you talk about users, basically users we can classify into two types. We have a two type of users. So when you talk about EBS, in EBS we just go and create the user from always from system administrator, and you can assign the employee to user. Otherwise, without assigning the employee also you'll be able to use that user. Okay, if you are going to perform any business transactions where certain controls you want to apply, it can be approvals, okay, or any other relevant process where employee association should be, will be associating. If you are creating some user for consultant, you may not map with the employee definition. So depending on need we may do it, but by default it is not required. When you talk about Fusion applications here, users, based on the definition, you can classify users are two type of users we have. One is implementation user. Other type of user is employee user. Okay, employee user. So what does it mean by implementation user? So we know in EBS we create a user always from system administrator, but here when you talk about Fusion, so when you take example of implementation user, this user can be created from IDM. Already we discussed what is the meaning of IDM. Identity manager, the same you can call as OIM, Oracle Identity Manager. Okay, when you say implementation user you can create from IDM. This is one of the middleware application. Otherwise you can create from security console. The user which you create in Fusion applications from IDM or security console, that user we call as implementation user. And if you create the user from HCM, human capital management, okay, if you create a user from human capital management, that user we call as employee user. So what is the difference between these two users? When you create user from IDM or security console, you cannot associate employee with that user. So if you create user from IDM or security console, that is just user. You cannot associate any employee. In EBS we'll create user from system administrator, then we'll create user from HRMS application. So employee will create from HRMS application. That employee you can associate with the user which is created in sysadmin. But here if you create a user from IDM or security console, you cannot do the employee association. But if you are going to create the user from HCM application, okay, if you are going to create the user from a HCM application, that user we call as employee user. What is the meaning of that? So how we create employee user? Employee user is nothing but we'll create employee only. So while you are creating the employee, if that employee need access to the system, will be making that employee only as a user. It's nothing but user and employee association with that combination. Okay, employee definition along with the user specification will be creating this user definition only we call as employee user. So in terms of application, primarily when you are going to work on financial application, how these two users are going to behave differently. So with implementation user is just user, there is no employee association. Okay, when you are going to work on the application with implementation user, you can do everything except supplier site creation. Okay, so if you are going to do all, you can do all the setups, any setup you can do. with respect to financials. Financials, when you talk about SCM, again, it's different. There are some other points also we have to understand. Let's talk about finance. Then we will be working on P2P and O2C cycles. At that time, we'll discuss the difference between implementation and employee user with respect to SCM process. So in finance point of view, you can complete all the setups except supplier site creation. Okay, being an employee user, you can create supplier site. Okay, so from implementation user, you cannot create the supplier sites. From an employee user, you can create the supplier site. That is the primary difference we have to understand between implementation user and employee user. The other difference is when you say implementation user, that is just user, there won't be any mapping with employee. But when you talk about employee user, basically we'll create employee only. For employee only, we'll provide the user credentials. That's how that definition will be doing in the application. So this is just simple point we have to understand. So from which user you can create the supplier site, and from which user you cannot create. You can create.
Laxman, question.
Please go ahead.
Is there anything that an employee user cannot do that an implementation could do?
No. Employee user will have full privileges based on the roles which we assign. Say for example, there is one role. Okay, if you are going to assign that role to these two users will be able to do it. But the additional point here we have to understand, even if you assign if you give the permissions to the user called as implementation user, that user cannot create the supplier site, but employee user will be able to do it. The employee user will have full privileges based on the roles which you are assigning. There is a limitation only for implementation user, not for employee user.
So, question, Laxman, this is Venkat.
Yeah.
So when you say for implementation user, it will have all the privileges except for supplier side creation, right? So for supplier side creation, will they have any additional role which will not be assigned to implementation user, or how is that? How does that restriction happen?
Even you assign the role to implementation user, still that user cannot do, since the user is not created based on employee definition. And there is one more dependency point also. I'll tell you that. So in the application, how they just build that privilege means, see here. Say for example, I am creating employee 1, say employee 1 and employee 2. So say employee user 1 and employee user 2. Say we have two users or two employees. So I'll assign the required privileges to these two users. Whether they can create the supplier sites or not, that completely depends on the additional definition called as procurement agent. Say we have two users who are employee users. We have a buyer definition in EBS. We'll create employee in the HRMS. The same employee you have to create as a buyer in purchasing in case of EBS. Here the same buyer we call as procurement agent. Now the employee you have to create as a procurement agent. So we have two employees, employee 1 and employee 2. Now I'm creating employee 1 as a procurement agent, but I'm not going to create employee 2 as a procurement agent. Now,
when you say employee 1 as a procurement agent, what exactly do you mean?
Buyer definition, that is some privilege.
Just set up that employee as a buyer. Yeah.
That's it. Buyer definition. That's all. The buyer only here we are calling as procurement. The term they given as a procurement. It's a buyer.
Okay.
As per EBS, just will be adding our employee into buyer list, right? In EBS, same.
Got it. Yeah.
Okay. So when you create employee as a procurement agent, this employee only can create the supplier site. Now we have two employees, but which employee can create the supplier site? The employee who is classified or created as a procurement agent, that employee only can create the supplier site. Now, in that case, when you have a implementation user, that you implementation user you cannot create as a procurement agent, because procurement agent you have, I mean, you can create only employee as a procurement agent, not implementation user. Okay, who can create the supplier side? Who is the buyer? Who can become buyer? Employee only, not implementation user. So implementation user you cannot make as a procurement agent. So that is reason we cannot create any supplier side from the implementation user. This is the point we have to understand. And if you take a simple example, the procurement, say SCM, or you can call as procurement, say purchasing. So you only procurement agent can create any documents. You take any just requisitions, purchase orders, negotiations, okay, any sort of document which comes under procurement. Any document can be prepared by procurement agent only. That means employee only can perform those activities, not implementation user. That's how they given the control.
So, Laxman, can we say the implementation user as a super user?
Yeah, yes, we can call as, when you say implementation user, super user. Who is the super user? User will give the all privileges, that user is super user generally. Can be function specific or multiple functions, whatever. Full privileges to whom you are giving, they'll be acting as a super user. Okay, even
so in this case it will be employee user, right?
Sorry?
In this case it will be employee user, right? Because they are allowed to create the supplier sites, whereas implementation user are restricted from creating a supplier site.
No, only this is the only one task they cannot perform. Rest everything they can do.
Okay.
Rest everything they can do.
Okay.
Here, please.
Laxman, in case of this implementation, if we want to create the supplier side, you told that we have to register ourselves as a procurement agent.
Yeah, procurement agent.
Yeah, but the thing is, in implementation, if we are going to implement this like in the go live stage, at the time, how we can create an employee in production environment.
Yeah. See here, in that case, what we'll do is we'll be using any one of the employee definition. Okay, we'll speak to the client and we'll be using any one of the employee definition, and we'll be assigning the required roles, which roles will give the privileges to complete all the setups, and we'll do the complete the configuration. Then we'll be removing the roles to that employee level. Then that employee won't be in the position to perform anything. But when we are
same as EPS, in EPS we use in the user screen we use the employee name.
Yes,
if we want to do some self-service like transactions and all.
Yes. In case of test and all, anyway, even if you are not going to use, if client is not going to use HCM also, still they given a basic function to create the employee user. The client may not take the subscription for HCM. Still, employee user definition shared function is available. That's how we can manage.
Laxman, I think you had there was some background noise. Can you repeat again what you said about if the client doesn't have HCM?
Yeah. So if client is not, if say you are going to implement, you are going to do the implementation, client subscribed only say for SCM and finance. So in that case, how to create the employee user? So to create the employee user, they are giving the basic function which allows you to create the employee user definition in the system. That may be not complete definition of actual employee creation in the system. If you have a subscription for HCM, then we'll get have access to full-fledged functionality where you can manage employee information. If you are not going to subscribe HCM, still Oracle is giving some shared service function which allows you to create the employee with the basic information. So that definition would be enough for us to create the employee user in the system.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thanks. So any other questions here, please? Okay, fine. And one more point here. So when we are creating the implementation user, we know like in EBS straight away we'll go and create the user. How we create user, will give the username and password. Done. That's all. But in the same way we can create in the Fusion also when you talk about implementation user. But if you want to create the employee user, while you are when you are creating the employee user, it's a mandatory you have to select legal entity and business unit BU. Okay, without providing these values, legal entity and business unit association with a employee, you cannot create employee user. Okay, these definitions are mandatory. That means in the fresh environment, you cannot create employee user straight away. First, we'll create the implementation user. Based on that, we'll complete all the setups like primary ledgers, legal entities, business units, and other setups. Once these setups are ready in the system, then system will allow you to create the employee user. This is another point to understand. So that means directly we can create employee user. Yeah, please.
Laxman question. So the implementation user and the employee user, like, are they both stored in the same backend table, or are they going to be stored like a different table? So
the same table, but this information, whatever they are based on the classification. See, when you are creating the employee user, you will be taking the classification as employee. But
okay, so that will differentiate the.
Yeah, when you create the implementation user, there is no employee related classification. Just for identification purpose, whom you are going to create, you can specify the value which doesn't have any functionality. Just identification.
Okay.
You can give. You are creating some non-worker or consultant. Okay.
Okay.
That's how you can provide information. So, any question here, please?
Laxman, I have a question. Like in EPS, we first of all we create a BG, and then in the BG we define HRS, and then we associate legal entity and business unit.
Correct.
Yeah, so similar way we do. Then we define employees whenever we want. So this is similar to EBS, right?
Yes, similar to EBS only. In the EBS, what are the sequence of setups will be doing? The same sequence will be doing, but here the additional point is will be associating, okay, the legal entity and the business unit to employee user. The reason is, so system will understand the employee is going to fall under which payroll system, which payroll process that has to be mapped. These legal entities need to be mapped with LDGs, legislative data group. That means, say there is one LDG for US. You created one US legislative data group. That legislative data group will be mapping with your legal entity. This legal entity you will be associating with your employee. Now system will understand this employee will falls under which country payroll. Okay.
Okay.
That's how they build the connectivity. Okay. Anyway, we'll see. I will discuss a few more information on this, and we'll be doing in the system. If you have any questions, definitely we can talk on that. But here, only the point I'm trying to just discuss is, so straight away in fresh environment, you cannot create employee user directly. The reason is there are some dependency setups. You have to get ready with the legal entity and the business unit. So if you are ready with the legal entity and business unit, can you create employee user? Still no. Before that, you have to create the legislative data group. That legislative data group you have to map with the legal entity. That legal entity only you can take into employee user definitions. Okay, there are some dependency setups. So the point which you have to understand is, In the fresh environment, only we can create implementation user. With the help of implementation user, we'll complete the required definitions. Once those definitions are ready, then we can create the employee user. If you have access to fresh instance, what approach we follow, what sequence of setups we will be doing, the same we are going to test in our classes. Okay, any questions here, please? If no question, we can jump into the next topic. Fine, no questions. So that's all about users. Basically, we have a two type of users: implementation user and employee user. Implementation user you can create from IDM, means identity manager. The same you can call as OIM also. OIM, when you say OIM, Oracle Identity Manager. And the other option we have to create users is security console. The security console, that functionality also is connected with IDM only. Okay, this is the some additional framework they given to create. Finally, this through security console, what are the users will create, that definitions will be hitting to this IDM only. And employee user you can create from the application human capital management. Yeah, please.
Priyanka, this is Priyanka. Quick question.
Yeah.
Mr. Laxman.
Yeah, please.
Okay, we have discussed about creating the users, right? For me, it looks like without having Oracle applications background, I'm asking a question. You could sound silly also, but I'm going ahead and asking the question.
Please.
These looks like an admin stuff and configuration kind of thing. So when we implement the Oracle Fusion application at a client site, we are providing the user access and setting it up for them so that they can use the application for their purpose. Is that right?
Yeah, that is nothing but employee user. We'll give certain privileges. Okay.
Right.
The employee will be working for specific business functions, right? So based on that, we give certain privileges through employee user. We don't create any user for employees as implementation user. The implementation user will create and will be using for our configuration purpose.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Fine.
Thank you.
Thank you. So any other questions, please? We'll see all these very detailed level in the system. We'll discuss once again. We'll add some other relevant points which will help us for better understanding. Okay, done. The next topic here is FSM, Functional Setup Manager. So say Functional Setup Manager. So in EBS, we have one place where you can do multiple setups. Okay, we have one place where you can do the multiple setup. That is nothing but ASM, right? Accounting Setup Manager. In GL, General Ledger application, we have ASM, Accounting Setup Manager. From that place, you can create primary ledger, secondary ledger, reporting ledger, okay, and organization definitions also. You can have a connectivity function from there only. That we can do many setups, but not all. But in the Fusion applications, we have one application called as Functional Setup Manager. Through Functional Setup Manager, we will be able to complete the setups for any application. In case of EBS, what we do is, if you want to do the payable setups, we have to switch to payables responsibility, super user responsibility. From there, you can do the payable setups. If you want to do for receivables, switch to receivables. So that's how we have to keep switching from one to other responsibilities. That's how we can do the setups. And the other point here is, in case of EBS, within the same super user, you can do the setups. Okay, or else let me take simple example. If I just state responsibility by using AP navigate GUI 12. By using this menu, if I create responsibility for payables, so from this responsibility, we can do the setups, because setup related submenus we can find and you can record the transactions. That means if user is going to have access to this, any one of the responsibility which has access to this menu, From the same responsibility, user can do the setups and user can perform the transactions also. Payable setups we can do and we can work on the invoicing process and the payment process. But Fusion, this way of design, they completely changed. Okay, the solution they changed. I mean to say the solution means here, so from specific, this is one menu. Okay, from this menu, user will be able to do the setups as well as transactions. But in the Fusion, you don't see in that way. To do the setups, they given the separate roles. To work on the transaction process, they given the different roles. Here we have a menus in the Fusion, as we discussed in the previous classes, we have a roles. So in case of EBS, one menu will allow us to do the setups as well as transactions. But in the Fusion, the roles whatever we have a separate roles for setups as well as transactions. Okay, setups as well as transactions. So if you have access to functional setup manager, okay, you can do all the setups, but you cannot record any transactions. You tell me in case of EBS, which responsibility we require to do the setups. If you are going to do the fresh implementation, we require access to which responsibility? Anyone, please. Fine. So when you talk about,
hello,
yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah, so we assign sysadmin first and then assign superuser responsibility to do the setups.
Yeah, that's it. That's it. First, we need sysadmin, system administrator responsibility. Yeah. If you have access to system administrator responsibility, from there you can start from the scratch of your configuration. From sysadmin, we'll create responsibilities and we'll connect to the responsibility. From those responsibilities, you can do the module specific setups. So that means to have access to do the any setups, we need system administrator responsibility. Equal to system administrator responsibility in EBS, in Fusion we have one role called as application implementation consultant role. Okay, if you assign system administrator responsibility to any user, that user can start with the implementation. In the same way, in Fusion application, if you assign this role called as application implementation consultant role to user, that user can start with system configuration. So when you assign the role, and you assign this application implementation consultant role to this user through application implementation consultant, the user will be able to connect to FSM. The application implementation consultant role will give the user, will give the access to functional setup manager. That's it. Okay. So we have to assign application implementation consultant role to user so that the user will get access to functional setup manager. From functional setup manager only we can do any setups in Fusion application. This is a place from where we do the setups and from where we can manage the setup related data also. And other points to understand related to functional setup manager, if you want to start with your implementation, what we have to do is, first we have to create the implementation project. Okay, first we have to create the implementation project. Before you go and create the implementation project, let's try to understand certain terminology within the functional setup manager. Here we use terms called as offering and option. What is the best example for offering? We call as financials as offering, SCM as offering, okay, HCM as offering. That means the specific product families, okay, which will support specific primary business process, those we call as offering. Some group of applications which has more relevance to execute certain business process, those applications we call as offering. Financials we call as offering as per FSM. As per functional setup manager, financials we call as offering, SCM we call as offering, HCM we call as another offering. So what does it mean by option? Option is nothing but the module or application we call as option. So GL is one option within the financial offering, AP is another option within the financial offering, AR is another offering. Say PO is one of the offering within SCM application, HR is one of the option within the HCM offering. So this is the terminology we use in functional setup manager. Offering and option. If you want to start with your implementation, okay, so you have to start your system configuration from functional setup manager. So if you want to start with the system configuration, first what we have to do is, as a mandatory, we have to create the implementation project. We have to create implementation project. We have to create implementation project. What does it mean by creating implementation project? So here when you say creating implementation project, this is only for the purpose of managing the system configuration. Don't compare our project accounting or other project definitions. This is when you say implementation project, here just to manage the setup. Say for example, you are going to implement financials and SCM. So you should be able to track how much percentage of the setups are completed in financial. Say for example, 80% setups are completed, and within SCM, say 90% setups are completed out of the setups what you have to complete. Okay, so you should be able to track which offerings you are implementing, which options you are implementing. Okay, so out of that, how much percentage of system related configuration is completed, that you should be able to track. So that is a one point. The other point is, in Fusion applications, if you want to do any setups, that you have to complete from the implementation project only. The purpose and all we'll see when we are working on the system. So certain setups you can do only from implementation project. So outside of the implementation project, you cannot do few setups. The reason, like there will be some scope concept and all that we'll be discussing. But here the point which you have to understand is, in Fusion application, if you want to do any system related configuration, you have to create the implementation project. Before that, what we have to do is, which offerings and which options you are going to implement for your client, that you have to select. Process wise, what we do is, in the fresh environment, first we have to enable the offerings and options. Enable offerings and options. Once you enable the offerings and options, those will be available to include in the project. First we'll enable offerings and options, then we'll create implementation project by selecting offerings and options. Once you create the implementation project by selecting the offerings and options, system creates task list. We'll talk on all this. Once you system creates a task list, you can start with the system configuration, or else you can say assign specific offering, or all offerings, or specific option, or multiple options, or task list, or task to team members. So we'll talk on these points one by one. Let me just list out in the sequence. So once we're done with that, then we can start with the actual configuration. Then we'll start with the system configuration. So update, status, track, project, progress, say generate reports. Which reports? Setup related reports, and say import or export setup data. So primarily these are the points we have to understand when you talk about function setup manager. Okay. So when you get access to the instance, okay, so what are the for which offerings and options we take in the subscription, those will be available within the instance, but reality which offerings and which options we want to use, those we have to enable. One, say for example, you are going to enable financials. When you enable the financials, within the financials, which modules you are going to implement, those also you have to select. That is nothing but options. You may enable offering called as financials. Within the financials, you may enable only options called as GL APR. Okay, you may not implement CM and FA for your client since they don't have great requirement to have a solution for CM and FA, for example. Or else you may enable, okay, all the options also within the financial offering. So as per scope of the project, based on the scope of the project, which modules we are going to implement, we will be enabling the offerings and options. Once you enable, you can go ahead and you can create the implementation project. What does it mean by creating implementation project? We'll be just giving the name, and who will be heading this project. We'll be assigning this project to so and so person will be part of the project, generally project manager. We'll be assigning the project to project manager, and within that project definition we'll be selecting the offerings and the options. So if you don't enable the offerings and options, you cannot select the same at the time of implementation project. Let's take simple example. When we create the primary ledger, if you want to select the currency, what we have to do? Before that, we have to enable the currency. The currencies which are enabled, those currencies only will be available to select at the time of primary ledger creation or any transaction process. If you don't enable currency, you cannot select that currency wherever that is required. The same way, in the environment, what are the fresh environment we get from Oracle, or else you can call as pod. Okay. So what are the pod? You can call, normally we use term called as pod or call it as instance, nothing wrong. Okay. So once you get fresh instance or fresh pod from Oracle, we have to enable the offerings and options as per the scope of the project. By selecting those offerings and options, will create the implementation project. So any question here, please? Then we'll proceed from here. Before that, any question here when you talk about offerings and options and the selection and the project creation?
When you said about the project management in the
it's not a great project management. It is just simple function which will allow us to track the progress of system configuration. That's it. Not much.
Oh, okay. Just for the setups.
Just for setups. So a simple example. If you are going to work as a project, will be just take information related to project resource and the scope of the project, and everything will be, you may take into some spreadsheet, right? So we are implementing financials. These are the modules. We are implementing SCM. So and so resource are going to work. So and so setup. These many setups are completed. Still for payables or so and so application, the consultant has to start with the configuration. Okay, this is how just will be tracking, and you may give some deadlines to complete the system configuration. So instead of maintaining that information outside of the system, so in Fusion we have a flexibility. You can track that information by creating the project. That's it. Only when you say implementation project, just our focus should be on setup part. That's all. Nothing else. Real, when you talk about implementation, that complete implementation life cycle, that is not going to be part of this. Out of the initiation, planning, and all things will come into the picture. Only system configuration execution you can track through this project. That's all. Okay, setup execution you can track with this implementation project.
Hi, Laxman. I have a question. So this is regarding the percentage of completion of the project progress.
Correct.
So can we actually monitor this at a user level, as in we've assigned particular tasks to a user? So can we find out if the user is falling behind, or are we on track? Is that possible?
We can do that. We can do that. We can, whatever the task you assign to the user, you will be able to set due dates also. So you can see what is the due date, and user is able to complete within the time. or it's a overdue of completing the task, all you can set it up.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Any other questions?
Laxman, I have a question. Is it employee can be also can be an application implementation consultant?
Yes, yes. So you can assign this role. Okay, application implementation consultant, if you are going to assign to implementation user, any user you can assign. To whom you assign this application implementation consultant, they can start work, they will get access to functional setup manager, and they'll be able to do all the system related configuration.
Okay.
Okay.
Irrespective of.
Does it always have?
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
It's an implementation user or it's employee user.
Yeah, irrespective of user classification, anyone can do the setup if you assign this role to that user.
So, Laxman, what's the use of like when we have two type of a user, and what's the use of implementation user then? Then employee can also do the same, like he can be assigned to application implementation consultant.
Yeah. So the user of implementation user is the implementation user will give you the option to start with the system configuration. Say you got fresh instance, you want to create employee user. Can you create? You can answer to my question. Can you create employee user straight away in the fresh environment?
No, you need to have.
Hear me?
Okay.
You have to the business units, legal entity, and
Yeah, LE and BU. Right? You should have LE and BU ready, then only you can create employee user.
So that is the only purpose
that
particular user is used.
Exactly. That is the primary purpose why we use.
Makes sense, yeah.
That's the reason they're given. If the employee user definition also is allowed in the Fusion application without selecting the business unit and legal entity, there should be only one user definition, one type of user definition.
Laxman, I have a question.
Yeah.
Laxman, I have a question on this application implementation consultant. That is a role that used for configuring basically in Fusion all these setups, right?
Creation and system configuration can be possible through this role.
Yeah, so in the EBS world, you know that either we have a DBA or a system administrator. They will, for example, I'm joining in a company, and someone has to provide this role. In Fusion, who will be controlling these roles? Who will have the access of all these roles and all? Then they can decide that this consultant need to be this particular role.
Yeah, same EBS practice you can apply here. When you are part of implementation consultant, so we are going to depend on DBA or someone else. So at the time of implementation, we should have all the privileges, right? So we'll have access to complete any environment, and we'll start doing. Once system will go live, then they'll their internal process and all will come into the picture. So the client may allow you to have access to this admin part, or else they may restrict and they may give the privileges to DBA. But here, when you talk about cloud, there is no DBA. But somebody will be administrating this kind of giving the access privileges. Normally, we see in the projects, consultant will be doing all this.
Right.
Yeah. So, any other questions here, please?
Laxman, sometimes during the financial setup, we need sometimes the responsibility in EBS as an inventory or a global HRMS. So if we enable offering these responsibilities, then does the Oracle Fusion create the implementation project?
Yeah, within that, see, you are selecting inventory, for example, as you just mentioned. You will be selecting, say, SCM. Within that, you will be selecting the inventory. So when you select the inventory into your project, inventory related all setups will be part of your implementation project. We have the same as the next point. We'll talk on that. Okay.
Okay.
Any questions here, please? Fine. No questions. So first we have to enable the offerings and options. then we'll create the implementation project by selecting the same offerings and options. Say for example, you selected offering called as financials. That means before that you enabled. And when you are creating the implementation project, say you included financials. Within the financials you included GL, AP, AR, CM and FA. So by including say this offering and these options, when you create the implementation project, automatically system will create the task list. Task list is nothing but list of setups. Task list is nothing but list of setups. Okay, list of setups for these 5 modules. So when you talk about accounts payables, which setups we will do as a basic or any function specific? So we'll set up financial options, say payable system setup, financial options, payable options, payment terms, distribution sets, tolerances, and many other setups which we'll do as a part of payables configuration. So once you create the project, within the project, what are the applications we have, which we call as options? What are the different options we have? All that option specific setups system will create automatically. That only we call as task list. Task list is nothing but list of setups. List of setup. Within that, each and every setup we call as task. Say task payment terms. Payment term in case of EBS we call as a function. We'll take some navigation from the responsibility, right? We'll say setup, invoice, payment term. That is a navigation. The payment term you call as a function. That function will help us to define the payment term. There we are calling as function in terms of defining something by taking the navigation. Here we call as a payment term is one of the tasks. Financial options is one of the tasks. Payable options is another task. So this is how you can just, there will be multiple tasks with respect to application. That only we call as task list. So what are the applications we are going to include in the implementation project creation time? For all those applications, system will create the task list. That is the meaning of system creates task list automatically. Any question here, please? Only task list for setups, not for, you don't see some task for invoice creation. When I talk about functional setup manager, only for the purpose of setups. So if you select option called as payables, only payable related setups only you can see within the project. So invoice creation, payment creation, okay, supplier creation, those you don't see as a part of implementation project. That has to be done by users. The people will be working in the organization. For that we have a separate role. This application implementation consultant role won't give you the access to record the transaction. This will give you the access to do only system related configuration. Okay, so system will create the task list for all the selected modules within the project. Then what we have to do is we'll assign specific offering. Offering means, here take example as financials. Financials we may assign to one team member who is a finance consultant, or else if it's a huge implementation, each module you may assign to different consultant. GL you can assign to one consultant, and you can set the due date, okay, by which date the resource has to complete the GL configuration. The same way APR, or else within the AP, say for example you have to complete 30 setups, okay, 30 different setups you have to complete, or 20 setups, and you can assign specific one task or 5 tasks or 10 tasks to specific team member. Okay, so you can assign complete entire offering or multiple offering to one resource, or else within one offering one option, nothing but one module, or multiple modules, nothing but multiple options, or else within that option specific task, specific list of tasks, task list you can assign 3, 4, 5, any number, or else one task. You may assign configuring financial options to one resource in the project. Okay, so based on how you planned system configuration execution, that you can assign to the team members. Yeah, please.
Yeah, Laxman and Venkat here. So you would actually create a project first, and then you will add team members to the project, and then you will assign these tasks.
Yeah. Generally, before you go and assign the project to the team members, we have to make sure that team members definition is ready in the system.
And where would you create this project?
Sorry?
Where will you create this project? Yeah.
Project will be creating in the FSM, Functional Setup Manager.
In FSM. Okay.
The Functional Setup Manager, we can create the project. The FSM only, we can enable the offerings and options. We can create the project. Within the project, system will create the task list, nothing but list of setups, which we have to execute module specific. And those you can assign to the team members. Assigning the project offering or option or task list or specific task to team member is optional. It's not required, mandatory. It's not mandatory. It's an optional task.
So Laxman, the team members will be like an employee user, like defining them as an employee user,
any user,
and then
generally consultants, not
like
generally employee users.
So we have to like in application implementation consultant. Do we need to define them in the system, or we can directly assign them?
We have anyway. They need system access, right?
Yeah.
So we will be creating. If really you want to associate offerings or optional task list to the team members, you have to create them. Or else in generally implementation, what we do, we will create one user by associating this application implementation consultant. Every consultant will be working from the same user. Or else we have a different offerings you are going to implement, say finance, SCM and HCM. You may create 3 users and you will be creating the project by selecting the 3 offerings. Then you can associate that each offering for respective consultant.
Okay. So we'll define them in HCM.
Yeah, no, not HCM. See, those are consultants, not in HCM. We'll be creating in IDM.
IDM.
Yeah.
You mean the implementation users?
Yes, as an implementation user, correct.
Laxman, regarding task assignment,
yeah.
If I assign task to a team member,
yeah,
can other team member access that task, or it's not visible to the person? Other person.
No, they can access. They can access. It's only the point is just to give you the information in the system who is responsible. That's it. No much control on that.
Not much control.
It is not going to be big. See, if you have a one spreadsheet, within that you mention some person name. You can change that person name.
Just a responsibility assignment, but there's no control as such.
Yeah. Okay. There is no control, just for information, so that you will be able to track from team member complete how much percentage of work, nothing but setup related work, task.
Okay. Understand.
Just for information, that's it.
Laxman, I have one question.
Yeah, please.
You have mentioned that the system creates the task list. That is the list of setups.
Yeah.
But the list of setup in the EBS we do on the basis of the business requirements. So how the system will know our requirements?
No. See, in EBS, can you tell me what point you are referring? In EBS, we do business requirements. What?
Okay. Suppose I do the payment documents. Okay. In the payment document, I actually.
Yeah, I got it. See, that will remain here. Same will be following. Say, for example, you are assigning, say AP Navigate GUI menu into responsibility that will assign to the user. Okay.
Okay. Yeah.
To that responsibility within that menu, within the navigator, the user will be able to see the submenus and functions, right?
Right.
Those submenus and functions only here we call as task list and task.
Oh, okay.
Whatever the setup you want to do, you do it. System is not going to give you the access to the relevant application related functionality, which is available as a standard functions. That's it.
Right.
Yep. The navigator wants to see all, we don't do it, right? So which are required.
Yeah.
Here also same. Yep.
Right.
If you want to compare with that here, you can just say here task list is equal to submenu over there in terms of navigation and task. Okay. Specific task is equal to menu, function over there. That's all.
Yeah.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks. So that's how we can assign one or multiple offerings or one or multiple options or specific task list or particular task to team member, and this assignment is optional. and you can assign one offering to multiple resource in the same way option or task list, or one task also you can assign to multiple resource, multiple team members. And for whatever you are assigning, you can set the what you can say due date. You can set the due date, and once then you can start with the configuration. If required, you can do the assignments. Otherwise, without assignments also you can proceed. The assignment is optional, but project creation time, that project assignment to project manager or someone who will be heading that project, that is mandatory. By default, system will take from which user you are creating the project, the project will get assigned to the same user. Okay, so this is optional. Once setups are ready, I mean once these task lists are ready, you can assign if you want to assign, otherwise you can ignore. Then you can start with the system configuration. Say for example, you completed say financial options. Then you can update the status against the task called as financial options, whether the task is not yet started or in progress or completed. These are the various statuses you can update, so that when you look at high level, at project level, the project give some progress, saying that, say you have a total for this entire implementation, say finance, SCM, HCM, you have a 700 setups which need to be completed. Out of 700, 300 not yet started. Okay, and 300 are completed, and say 100 in progress. So this is how you can see the progress of the project. So when you are doing the setups based on the task which you are completing or working, you can update the status against the task, or against the offering, or against the option. Any level you can go and give the status update, so that will be tracked at project level. So based on that, simply you can submit the reports also. If you want to report to someone, or if you want to share the progress of the system configuration, you can generate the reports. That everything we can do from the functional setup manager. Apart from that, say you created a project and you completed setups, the same setups you want to move from one instance to other instance. Say in the test environment you completed setups and you tested, but now you want to move only configuration related data. Setup data is nothing but configuration data. The data you want to move from test instance to production instance, we can export. Okay, you can export all the setup data by targeting one project, and you can import into another instance. For this we use the function called as configuration packages. By using the configuration packages, you can move the setups from one instance to other instance. It's a simple task. Okay, so primarily this is the purpose we have a functional setup manager. So majorly to understand configuration purpose. Along with the configuration, this is how we have to manage. We have to enable, then we have to create the project. And say for example, you created one implementation project. Later, any point of time, you can add additional offerings or additional options, or specific task also you can include. And say for example, you are going to implement these 3 offerings. Now how many projects you have to create, that's up to us. For each offering you can create separate project, or for 3 offerings you can create separate one project, or only for these 2 offerings one project, for HCM separate project. It's all about how you want to track. You want to track the setup related progress across these 3 offerings, or offering wise you want to track, or for specific offerings by combining you want to track. How you want to track, that makes the difference. Okay, if you are going to create the different projects, don't think the setups are going to be different. So from any project you do the setups, it will get stored in the actual respective tables only. It will all store in the same table, so where that setup is targeted to store. That's how it works. You may delete the project, but your setups cannot be deleted. The project is some framework they are giving to manage the setup and all that information. But if you say you are going to create one project, you completed payable setups and you deleted project, just you are deleting some navigation path from where you can go and do the setups. But the setups what you did, whatever system is going to get stored in the database, those are not going to be deleted. The framework will be deleted. That's how it works. So any questions on this, please?
So Laxman, from like a support standpoint, if later on we have some setups that we have to do, you still use the import and export configuration packages?
No. If you want to do some additional setups, go to existing project and do the additional setup. That's all. You want to create just 751 users are using. You want to create 2 more payment terms. Just go to implementation project, search for the task called as payment terms. Then you'll find the function called as the task called as payment term. Just create 2 more payment terms. That's how any additional setups which are required for the business you can do it.
Can we roll back the setup once it is done?
No. You cannot do that. If as per that setup, if Oracle will delete it. So whatever you can delete, once you do the setup in case of EBS, whatever you can delete, the same you can delete here also. And one more point I just include, we have an approach called as a rapid implementation. So when you say rapid implementation, Oracle is providing the spreadsheets. So within the spreadsheet, you can keep the information that you can load into the system also. That also will be covering in our classes. So the calendar creation, chart of account creation, primary ledger, business units, legal entities, all you don't need to go on to take the navigation to create in the system. I'll take you through in the 2 options. One is how to create in the manual process within the system. Then how to keep all the information in the Oracle predefined spreadsheet templates, and how to load into the system. These 2 will be covering in our classes. So you can just keep the data.
Laxman, question.
You can load into the system that we call as rapid implementation. Yeah, please.
Yeah. So typically, for any implementation, there is going to be one implementation project, just one. Yeah.
I'm sorry. Could you please repeat your question?
No, what I was asking is, so if I'm going to do an implementation, right, Fusion Cloud, so typically there is going to be only one implementation project under which I will have all these setups and stuff.
Correct. But to manage the setup, how many unit of projects you want to create within that system, that is up to us. But reality, client is one implementation.
Okay. And I actually didn't follow your answer for when you said if someone asked, like if they want to roll back the setups, right? What are the options? I didn't hear that on your answer. Can you please repeat that?
What I'm saying is, see, it's a rollback means it's like you want to delete it, right?
Yeah, delete or change. Yeah.
See, what I said is, in EBS we'll do the setups. The same way we are going to do setups in the Fusion also. So for which setups Oracle is giving the permission to delete, the same is applicable here also. That's it. There is no other logic or other privileges.
Just open the project and look for the task for which has a setup you want to change or delete, and then it allows, then go ahead.
You have to navigate and you have to query, and you can do it.
Okay.
Here there is no query, since it's a package. It's always search option.
Okay, and you can search by the offering and the options too, right?
Yeah. Yes, once you create the project, you will be opening the project. Within that, you will be finding all the offerings and options. Offerings you will be finding directly. Just you have to, they given one search command, command field. From there you can go and search directly. Payment terms you can search, it will come out. You don't need to give percentage.
It's just that it's all theoretical, right? Like probably once we see the system, we will we will be able to visualize this much better than.
Exactly. Just I am trying to introduce what we are going to do. That's all. So more detail level, we will discuss whatever required.
Sure. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks. Any other questions?
Laxman? Yeah, Laxman, this is that. Can I assume that you'll have the exact same features like EBS of end dating if you can't delete it? That's the only thing I assume. Is that correct?
Yes, certain functions where Oracle is not giving option to delete, they'll be giving option to date or end date, or even the end date is deletion is applicable. They may provide to date also, end date also.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, the responsibility, right? When you assign to user, we can't delete them. We can just end date it.
Exactly. There we cannot delete it, so they give an end date. But similar to that, in EBS we are assigning the responsibility to user. In Fusion, we'll be assigning the role to user. But here role you will be able to delete. That provision they given. You can remove.
Okay.
Yep.
So then, don't you think it'll be it'll have an impact to the audit when an audit takes place?
See, audit, when you say audit, it's all about transactions, right? It's a business transaction. There won't be any impact.
No, because when if someone asks you why were you assigned this responsibility in the first place?
So why you assign? See, somebody has to perform some task in the organization. Anyone can perform. Audit won't question why this guy is it and why that guy is not doing, right? So it's all about giving the privileges. You can give the privileges to anyone. Auditor or somebody is not going to question us why this guy is doing and why that guy is not doing, right? It's all about, they'll be questioning about your business transaction and how you are managing that relevant. The access, nobody is going to question us. That's a company decision and the people expertise, the organization.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, thank you. See, today the one guy may work in the payables department. From tomorrow, you may just switch to other department. In that case, I should not give any access to that payable related function access. I have to completely remove. I have to assign another privileges, right? Grants are say rules or responsibilities. Fine. Any questions here?
Laxman, this is Ijas. I have a question on this import and export option. So, one end of suppose you have, so you are doing this configuration for a business unit, like operating unit.
Yeah.
EBS, right?
Yeah.
So this functionality, if you do multiple business unit within one enterprise, so you don't have to actually duplicate the same task. So we can actually export from here, and then while doing the configuration for the next business unit, you can import the same setup, and probably you can do some changes additional. Is that right?
No. This is not. It won't work in that way. It's the meaning of whatever you already completed, that you can export. As this, you can move to other instance. That is the purpose. It's not like for one BU you'll do the setups and will again and will do the modification, will export. Again, that falls into be technical work in the process of how Oracle given a configuration packages. There is no.
So you still have to do. You still have to replicate, do the same setup for other business units, right?
You have to do it. You have to do it. But if you mean one instance, that you can just move to other instance. That flexibility they given.
One instance to another instance, not one business unit to another business unit.
Yes.
Okay, that's fine.
You mean like, say, from pre-prod to prod, something like that you're saying?
Yes. But other point is here only we can, as a functional consultant, by using the configuration packages, you can move the only setup data, not transactional data. Anyway, if you want to move everything, so cloning, you have to contact Oracle cloud team, the DBA team, like they'll be helping for cloning. But here the configuration packages will help us to copy and do just to import and export and import only setup data, only setup configuration data. It's not applicable for transactional data.
In e-business, do you have an option like iSetup where you can upload all the information, setup data, and is there anything similar to Fusion?
Same. This configuration package is only you can use for that similar task. But they made it very simple here. Just anyone can go and do it. That's how we have. If they have privileges, just they can go and do it.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, thanks.
Laxman, I have a question regarding role assignment.
Yeah, please.
Yeah. Can the roles be assigned through a process, or it has to be assigned manually only?
Roles can be. I'm sorry, I didn't get you. Roles can
For
be.
example, currently in the e-business suite, we have built a custom application through which, for each responsibility, we have a process owner who approves it. Once approved, then we automatically assign that responsibility to the user. Now, in the similar thing in Fusion, if I have to do, maybe I have to build under past environment, I build that application. So once the approval comes from the process owner, can I trigger something to auto assign the role to the user?
Yeah, similar logic here we have with the concept called as role mapping. Role mapping. You can specify. You can specify with the so and so classification if you are going to create the user. So So these roles need to be assigned automatically. That's how you can set, but you don't see the great usage of the advantage of that function when you are working on finance. Normally that is very much applicable for HR related applications. So here I'll show you that function, how it works, but it's not that much useful here. You can just do the mapping. These 2 roles, 3 roles need to be get assigned for any user or specific classification of user, normal employee or contingent worker, or for say line manager. Or you can.
That is more of auto assignment, right? But I'm looking at a specific role assigning based on a process owner's approval to a specific user for a certain period of time to an application.
No. That options we don't have here.
You know, even in past won't be possible.
No, nowhere like just it's all completely you have to do through manual process. Only the option is mapping you can do. That once you create user automatically, that auto provisioning we call here auto provisioning. So based on that mapping system will auto provision the access to specific roles for particular user based on the criteria of mapping you did. Now in other cases only the option is manual assignment.
Okay. Okay.
Fine. It's almost 9:40 now. Fine. The user creation we'll see in the tomorrow session there. Okay. Don't have time. Takes some time. We have to go detail level. So user creation we'll see the system in the tomorrow session. Any questions based on today's session or last 2 sessions, please? So we discussed about users and functional setup manager. Last session discussed about structure.
You were telling about something spreadsheet in rapid implementation.
Yeah.
The usage of spreadsheet.
Yeah, I'm just talking about rapid implementation spreadsheet. What is your question there?
Yeah, how we use the spreadsheet for the rapid implementation?
See, like that spreadsheet will have its in EBS we know like web ADA, right? Web ADA will have it's a formatted sheet.
Yes.
In the same way, rapid implementation spreadsheet also you can see in the same way will be once you open that there will be some fields like you need calendar with which name, okay, and how many periods you require. Simple point will enter the data in the data loader sheets, right, to load into the system. Okay.
So this rapid implementation we use for the small projects, or can we use for every project?
In any project. Say for example, I have in every project you have to do the setups. So instead of directly navigating into the application and doing the setups, so provide the setup related data in the spreadsheet, load it automatically based on that setup data, system will do the configuration.
Okay. Then in this case, no need to go for all this stuff, enable offering option, create implementation, system create.
That is required. That is required. See, so system will do certain setups. The rest of all setups we have to do in the system process only. You have to, and project is mandatory. Why it is mandatory? We'll discuss on that. We have an example to understand. Okay, project creation is mandatory. Yeah, please.
Laxman, I have a question. So in EBS, web ADA is very anemic. I mean, very few options. So can I assume that there are lots of significantly more options here than web ADA as such?
Web ADA, same web ADA here we are calling as ADFDI. Application Desktop Framework Data Integrator. So when you talk about web ADA in EBS, respective to finance, we have GL, journals we have web ADA, and FA we have for additions, right? But in Fusion you see in almost all the applications we have in GL, AP, AR. In AP you can create invoices through spreadsheet by using ADFDI. It's nothing but web ADA function. Here we are calling as ADFDI. And receipts you can create in receivables. Assets you can create just additions and all. In GL anyway, journals you will be able to create. So and that's how they give a recurring invoice concept also through ADFDI only. There are many other functions also they included with this function.
Okay, so are there any functions for supply chain as well?
For supply chain also, yes, they given like some document preparation and all they given in the ADFDA.
Okay, thank you.
And again, other point is when we are doing the conversions, so we'll be doing the populating the data in the interface, right? So if you want to view the data which is there in the interface, you can connect to that data through this ADFDA only. Whatever the data you have in the interface, that will be fetched into ADFDA. Within the ADFDA, you can do the corrections or require modification. Then from a spreadsheet only, you can submit. That's how you can import into base tables.
Can that data be extracted before it is submitted?
Yeah. It will be extracted. Whatever you have in the interface, it will be fetched. Take example of our auto invoice interface. So say you are trying to run auto invoice import and it ended with errors. That errors you can see in the errors table. Okay, but if you want to do some modifications, you have to go and do the corrections, and again that is a completely form. But in case of Fusion, so you can just connect to that function. It will fetch all the within the interface, whatever the data you have with errors, all it will fetch into spreadsheet. With spreadsheet level, you can do the changes. Okay, that you can resubmit from there only. Again, you don't need to go and run the manual program. You don't need to do all this job.
Just like we submit in WebADA when we upload it directly from the sheet. That's how.
Yeah. WebADA will have the live connectivity with the application, right? So in the same way, this all will have with a database connectivity. That's how you can you can modify, you can update, and you can submit. That's it.
All right, fine. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
So who is the user, first ever user that can log into the system, Laxman? Is it a sysadmin, same as EBS?
I'm getting a lot of noise. Okay. So when you take the subscription, Oracle will provide credentials. Okay. So definitely here, since there is no DBA in our cloud projects from client side, will be the admin or anything. So we'll get that credentials, whatever Oracle is providing, we'll be getting from the client or directly from Oracle. So depending on communication, who are communicating with Oracle, then we can start with that credentials. Then we can go and create our own user and we can start with the implementation. Contact.
Subscription is based on user. Oracle will provide the subscription based on user per user.
Yeah. Based on subscription is based on offerings and options primarily. So based on that user again. Offering and option based subscription again that will be done based on number of users.
Lakshman, regarding subscription, is it as per use or minimum is 1 year?
So it's a period only. It's a periodic subscription only will be getting. If there is some,
so for example, somebody going on leave.
So yeah, please go ahead.
They assign for 1 month a user a particular access, so will be charged for that 1 month.
They don't give for just 1 month and all. They'll be normally will be taking yearly subscriptions. Okay, but if you need, definitely they have option to give, but generally we don't go with that since it's a business, right? So they'll be taking for just initially 1 year or 2 years, 3 years. So we'll take the subscription, we'll do the implementation, and then we'll start using. Okay, normally you see the cases, it's not in the months, but Oracle is ready to give the subscription for monthly base also. You can take for 1 quarter and you can use that instance.
Okay.
But by taking 1 quarter or 6 months, you cannot take any advantage of that subscription, right?
No, it's not about advantage, just temporary, adding some more people and removing them later.
Yes, you can take it. That is possible. But again, there are some minimum number which Oracle is specific. Okay, so also we have to look into that. So minimum for offering, you should have these many number of user subscription. Less than that, they don't give you. So that's how. limitations.
How much will be the cost approximately for the subscription? Just for an idea.
So it's always when you compare with on-premise, very less cost. If you want to get to know that information, I'll be sharing that relevant link. You can go through it. Maybe in the possible today or else in the tomorrow, along with the meeting link, I'll be sharing that the price list, price card related link. I'll be sharing. Just you can have a look. You can get some information on that. Any other questions, please?
Can you tell me the generated setup report?
Sorry?
Any example for the generating setup reports?
Setup report. See, I want to just generate the setup report for payables. Okay, I'll be selecting their payables over there and I'll be submitting. There'll be directly icon, view report. If you click on that, it will generate. Otherwise, you will be selecting financial offering. There within the project, you against the financials, there will be one icon to generate the report. You can click on that. It will generate from then and there. That's it. You don't need to just go and submit through some navigation and all. When you are in the project,
okay,
so one click you can generate. That's it.
Okay. So what about the system configuration? What type of things in the system configuration?
System configuration nothing but module specific setups. Say calendar creation, chart of accounts creation, primary ledger creation, payable options, system options in receivables, transaction types, transaction source definition. What are the setups we do?
Okay.
Those setups only I am just mentioned here as a system configuration. Setups. Module specific setups. Fine, any other questions, please? Fine. So then that's all for today. We'll connect tomorrow same time. Okay, thanks for joining this session. Have a good day and good night. Thank you.
Hello?
Yeah, please.
Thank you.
Laxman, please share these videos on the Google Drive because we are unable to prepare these lectures yesterday.
We'll do that.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Thanks.